Hi, this is Bill Seaback, and this is part 2 of your interview prep for your upcoming interview. In the last section, we covered an overview. Wanted to give you a layout of the land in terms of where we're going, what are the expectations of the process, and sort of a map of how we're going to get there. Now we're going to switch the focus to the tactics of the interview, things that you should do, things that you should avoid doing, and then we'll finalize things with a brief summary. Remember that you're going to debrief with me when you come out of the interview. I'm going to ask you to call me as soon as you're done, and I'm going to ask you 3 key questions. Can you do the job as they defined it for you? Is this a job that you think you want to do at this point in your career? And do these seem to be people you want to do it with? The reason that we ask about the job as they define it for you is that I'm just the agent. You two are the principals. And it's more important that you hear the definition of the role from sort of the horse's mouth, so to speak, than it is from me. Obviously, it should be exactly the same as the way I've described it to you. But if there are differences, hopefully they'll be subtle if there are. But nevertheless, whatever changes come about, potential changes come about in the role, it's important that you hear it from the employer so that you have a full opportunity to dialogue and vet this through to your satisfaction, to make sure you understand it. So, to the beginning of the interview, you're obviously going to go to the company, you're going to meet the receptionist, and be escorted into a room. You'll have a moment or two of pleasantries. Hi, how you doing? How was the drive? So forth. How was the plane ride? Whatever the case may be. And very quickly, the interview is going to turn into the interview itself. And you're going to sense that it is time to, get the show on. And but please don't make the mistake that people are not looking at you from the moment you walk into the building. You need to make sure that your posture is correct, that you look good, you've got the right attitude on your face, and that you're exuding positive energy. When you meet the employer and all the employees for that matter, make sure you give them a firm handshake. A lot of eye contact is very important. A healthy smile and posture on your face. When you meet with the main individual or individuals that you're going to be interviewing, make sure that you have very positive eye contact, good body language, and that you're enunciating and articulating your communication in a very positive way. This is especially important for people in the business development, the client service arena, and obviously for senior level positions as well. Now, we ask that you have the employer define the role for you because we want to make sure that there are no misunderstandings about the role. You obviously have been brought forward in this interview process because I've defined the role for you and it's something that you think might be appealing to you, but we want to make sure that the employer does initiate a definition of the role. It's very possible that there could have been changes from the time that they commissioned me to do the search until the time that you showed up. Or there may be different roles that come into play once the interview takes place and you get a sense of them and they get a sense of you. There very well may be different opportunities that come about that you may be interested in or they may have an interest in discussing with you. So, why do we want to start off with the definition of the role? Well, usually most employers are going to start off the interview by getting you to talk about yourself to them so that they get comfortable because, usually they're, to be honest with you, they're always not really well prepared as they should be. They're normatively coming from another meeting or a series of meetings, or maybe they were on the phone with a client and so forth. And so they're going to take a few minutes to get comfortable and settled in. So they usually do that by having the candidate talk about themselves for a moment, and they may ask specific or very generalized questions. Now, our tactics in the interview are going to be to sort of turn that right around on them. And let's say if Jim says, "Look, Mary, I'd really like you to start off by telling me a little bit about your current opportunity, what you like, or why did you respond to this opportunity, and so forth." I think this is the perfect opportunity in the interview for you to say, "Well, good, I'm happy to talk about myself, Jim, but before I do, why don't we first start with you telling me a little bit more about the role, so that I know exactly how to pull the salient points out of my background and my achievements that are going to address the issues concerned with this role. And that way our dialogue is going to be much more fruitful with one another. It'll be pinpointed and very focused, so that we can get on about the business of evaluating this thing together. So the dynamic of that interaction is that you're actually taking control of the interview by getting the employer to talk to you. There's no better way to pass a test than to know the questions and certainly to know the answers. And by getting an employer to talk about the role and other aspects that we're going to reveal in a moment, you're actually getting the employer to lay out for you a roadmap of where he wants you to take him or her during the interview. And so why not have a roadmap? Why go blindly into that into that process? It's much easier to have some illumination, and the first part of this process is getting the employer to tell you what he wants in terms of a role. Now, equally important, or probably even more so important, is not the role itself, excuse me, but rather the employer's expectations of successful performance in that role. For example, if you were to work for me and your job was to run the mile, so every day you'd get on a plane, fly to Jacksonville, put on your jogging suit, go run the mile, come back to the office, change, and go home, and that was your job. At some point during the first week or first month, you're going to ask me, hey Bill, how fast do you want me to do this? And if I say, well, I'd really like you to do this in 3 minutes and 35 seconds, when you're done laughing, you're going to say, well, the fastest person in history is 3:40, and since I'm not a world-class miler, there's no way I can achieve those objectives. We've got a big problem on our hands, don't we? And the reason that most relationships, either professional or personal, fail is because expectations aren't clearly delineated. They're not called out, they're not discussed, they're not agreed to in the front end of the process. And so once we understand what the role is, we really want the opportunity to dialogue through with our employer of what their expectations are in the role. The first 90 days, the first 180 days, the first year. That way, based on your expertise in this business, you're going to be able to sort of vet that through and dialogue in a healthy way whether or not you think the employer's expectations are reasonable. You'll find that many times the employers have unreasonable expectations about opportunities, and then you'll find other employers who have very, very reasonable expectations. And so hopefully as the two of you go through the process together, understanding the role and understanding the expectations in the role, that's going to be able to give you a very good framework as to whether or not this is something that you want to continue to pursue to the next level. Beyond understanding the role and the expectations, I really believe that the employer needs to address, in a brief way, operationally, how business is achieved and how it flows through the organization from sort of start to finish, to give you an idea of where your role fits, how important it is, and how you'll be able to assimilate into the fabric of how they do their work. This is absolutely critical, and a critical understanding that you must walk away from, or with rather, from the first meeting. Understanding the role, understanding the employer's expectations, successful performance in the role, and then understanding how they do business, getting a sense for how work flows through the organization, so you can really see how your position fits into the organization and how it impacts the business in terms of meeting client needs and expectations. The second set of questions then are going to really address the overall question of why this company and why now in its history. And I like to have candidates talk to employers in terms of what attracted them to the company, what keeps them at the company. In the case of an entrepreneur, why did they start this business? And ask them the question, why is it this company over 5 other companies? In your mind, what are the compelling reasons to join this organization at this point in the company's history? And these are really critical for you to get an understanding of whether or not these are the kind of people that you think you might want to be working with in the future. If they don't have an idea of how to answer that question, that should raise some red flags, because if they don't know what distinguishes themselves among the people that are potentially their future employees, how on earth can they distinguish themselves in the competitive landscape and that means that they're probably going to have a pretty short life cycle. So let's recap.